Today's session will be for 60 minutes and Sri Krishnapani K.C. Raju will talk to us for about 40-45 minutes, after which there'll be the Q&A for 15-20 minutes and Krishnapani ji will manage that. But please post your questions on the chat function. Thank you so much for being here. Over to you, Krishnapani ji.
Thank you very much. So we will be starting the program, today's session, which I have given the title of Solve, Resolve, Dissolve. This title of Solve, Resolve, Dissolve, I have been taking down a lot of notes as and when I, some thought comes to me, and then I keep preparing some notes on a subject. And interestingly, this particular topic was, I made some notes more than 4 years back. It was, to be precise, it was on 16th of March, 2016. And I have been adding some notes, changing some notes, doing some modifications. And finally, we have one version of this particular topic now. So I'll, before I go to the next slide, I just would like to say that if we examine our mental activity closely, we find that there is a lot of confusion and jumbling and mixing up of issues. Especially, we mix up material and non-material issues. That means we mix up physical things and emotional aspects of it and make it into a big, I would say, not bad in saying that, we are in a mess in certain ways. That means there is a way of actually, involving ourselves in things and complicating them instead of simplifying. Way back, almost 35, 40 years back, there was an old gentleman who had told me that, by the time itself, we were of the next generation for them, next or the second generation for them. He was mentioning that, earlier, we used to love people and use things. Now, the trend is that we use people and love things. So that, made a great impact on me. If you literally see, that has actually over the past 35, 40 years, it has tremendously grown, where we only seem to be loving things and using people for our convenience. And that has complicated things. The more sophisticated, the more expensive the gadgets and the instruments and technology we have, the more involved and the more complicated we seem to be rather than simplifying our life. So we'll go to the next slide to understand the definitions of these three terms: solve, resolve, and dissolve. Now, the term solve means to find an answer, an explanation, a way of dealing with, and clear up things. That's how we use the term solve. Solve means we want to find an answer. There is a problem, we want to solve that problem. There is a puzzle, we want to solve it, and we want to understand something mentally, and therefore we want an explanation for it. We need to know how we are going to deal with it. We want to pigeonhole it. We want to clarify in our mind and put it in a corner as though we have understood it. So we want to clear it up. It should be clear to us. So that's the meaning of the term solve. Then we come to the second word, resolve. Resolve is to make a firm decision, to bring to a successful conclusion, to render parts of an image visible and distinct. In the sense, in science and all, we talk about resolution. High resolution, low resolution, especially of say cameras or telescopes or microscopes. we talk about resolution. There also we use this term resolve. It's basically to make the image visible and distinct. That means we should be able to very clearly see what exactly we want to see. And it's actually to, some things need to be brought into focus. Sometimes some aspects need to be focused. And that's the idea when the definition says to render parts of an image visible and distinct. Sometimes we want to focus on a certain thing. So we need to make it very distinct and clear to our vision. So it involves these three aspects of making a firm decision, bringing something to a successful conclusion, and making things very distinct and clear. Then the word dissolve. The word dissolve means cause to disappear, vanish, dispel, to bring to an end. It is no longer an issue at all. When you dissolve something, what it means is it's no longer an issue for us. It simply disappears. It is dispelled, brought it to a complete end. We have ended it once for all. That's the meaning of the term dissolve. So we will bear these definitions in mind as we proceed to discuss the things further. We can go to the next thing. Now, how do we approach these things? Now, according to my understanding, solve problems means they are something related to the objective, the physical, mundane world in which we live and we interact on a regular basis. Continuously, we are involved in the physical world around us. The physical things are there. Like you have everything that is physically available. So it is the objective world outside, and we can experience the objective world through our senses. And this is a very important thing for our own survival, for our growth, for development, for our comfort and enjoyment. So the physical world is a very important aspect of it because we live our daily life in that physical world. And we experience all our life because all life is essentially experiential through not only the five senses, but also the mind. So these are six instruments that are available to us to visualize the physical world. And when we have an issue in the physical world, we solve those things in the sense that suppose you have a problem. Like for example, we'll take a very ordinary problem like some household issue. You have some plumbing problem or electrical problem, or you have something is broken, you need to fix it up, or something is not working. You see that it starts working, just like now what we have seen, the one laptop was not working and I have used another laptop. We are fixing these problems. So when we use the word solve, the approach is to act upon that physical object and see that it does not give me a problem, or it is made useful for me, because that is essential for my survival. So there's a learning process also involved in this. For example, we talk about, say, agriculture or industrial activity or production or whatever it is. We encounter so many issues with that. These are all problems which are connected to the objective physical world, and we address those issues. We address those problems in a rational manner with our understanding, with our past experience, with the collective experience of humanity which has been passed on to us, which we learn from each other. All these things, we solve them. So solution relates to the physical objective world outside us, and that's how we approach it, where when we say we solve it. And as I have mentioned in the definition, it means we are trying to find an answer to clear up an issue. we are trying to find a way of dealing with it, isn't it? So that is the approach related to what I call as solve. Now, when it comes to resolve, this resolution, as one of the definitions says, is to bring to a successful conclusion any problem that we encounter. Now, what does it mean? Resolve relates to our mental, emotional, social, cultural, and relationship issues. See, we have problems with people, isn't it? The major issue is that we have complicated in our mind several issues and they remain unresolved. Your mental issues or your emotional issues, or there are social issues or cultural issues. Essentially, they are all relationship issues. I am related to somebody. I am related not only to an individual, but to a group. I may have issues with that person, with that group. Either it could be a mental thing in the sense we don't agree upon several things. And then there are emotional issues. We live together in a family, wife and husband, children, parents, grandparents, relations. So everything is a relationship. If you look at life, as Jiddu Krishnamurti used to say, all life is relationship. There's nothing if there is no relationship. Even the physical world, we are related to it. So every aspect of it is a question of directly relating to it. So there, without relationship, there is no life at all. As I said, when we are concerned with the physical world, there it is experiential. We experience the sense of sight or touch or taste or smell or whatever it is. So there it is experiential. And at the second level, it is a relationship. It is a relationship. We are concerned with the persons here. And obviously, when we have somebody else other than me, and I have established some form of relationship, then there are issues, there are problems related to that. These things have to be resolved. We have to find a successful conclusion to that. We have to see that once for all, these issues are resolved. It's not as though that they don't come up. They keep coming up, but you resolve them. Like for example, when you have a leakage in the bathroom, it's not something permanent. You set it up, you fix it up, and it may come again. And you have to address it once again. You may have to sometimes replace the whole thing. So similarly, in relationship also, we may have an issue. We may sort it out. But then the issue, it's not as though that it won't come again. It will definitely come again. And then we have to address it again and bring it to a successful conclusion and resolve it. But mostly what happens is, if we examine our own lives, we find that we leave most of these issues unresolved. We leave them unresolved, and there will be a continuous emotional stress or mental stress, and socially isolated, being culturally pulled in different directions, and then every relationship becomes a very difficult thing to manage. So when you come to relationship, it is something which has to be resolved. Now the third dimension is dissolve. Dissolve is to ensure that no problem is there and no problem arises at all. Dissolve all problems related to whether physical, emotional, mental, relationship through negation of the self or the image of oneself which has created the center. We call it as the I. Now, do you see that when we are dealing with the world and when we are dealing with relationship with other people, it is always the me or the I which is the center of all activities. Everything is connected to me. It is my life, my survival, my growth, my comfort, my enjoyment. And similarly, every relationship, every mental or emotional aspect, it is the me which is important. It is the me which comes into the fore, and that becomes the most important thing. So we need to very clearly understand that we have created this entity called as the self through a process in life where we experience certain things, then we gather some information, inputs, and convert that into some kind of understanding or concepts or ideas or knowledge, and then we store it. We store it in our memory so that we can retrieve it, we can restore it and use it as and when required, because that's a natural process in life, because you can't every time be reinventing the wheel and then starting every time afresh. It's not possible at all, because life involves growth, life involves development in some form or the other. So what is happening here is a, an experience and knowledge and the memory which are important in one direction. When it comes to learning some skills, learning some art, or learning any technique for survival or for development, when it comes to relationships, the same memory, the same experience becomes a major hurdle. I have had a bad experience with somebody. Essentially, the person may not be bad. It may be an unfortunate situation that in a particular setup, I had an issue with that person, with that individual. But if it hurts me, here, as I said, the connection is the me. I have an image about myself, I have an image about that gentleman, I have an idea or a concept about him, and I assume that he is supposed to behave like this, but he doesn't behave that way. And I register a hurt. So the self, the image which has been created over a long period of time in one's own life, becomes a strong permanent entity in some respects, and everything is every interaction that is in the fore, it's in the forefront. This I is in the forefront. But when it comes to dissolving, one has to realize that this image, this self which we have created, is the biggest hurdle. Now I'll give you an example. For instance, what happens is, when we are talking about dissolving, a person could face some physical problem, physical deprivation or something. For example, we are so much used to these comforts in our life now. So there is a breakdown in the electric supply. It becomes a major worry. It becomes a major emotional or mental issue for us. Much more than that is what is being called as, if you are disconnected, if the internet goes off, we are all disturbed. We're all terribly disturbed about it. So a physical thing going wrong is creating a great mental stress. So what is happening here? You have developed a close association and a strong bondage with a physical thing in terms of your mental and emotional status, state of your being. What is your mental and emotional state of being if you are disconnected? Now, if you understand this issue of the self, for such a person, it doesn't matter. That means the being disconnected for a time being does not cause any stress, either mentally or emotionally. That is what is indicated by the term dissolve. So whether you have something or whether they don't have something, whether it is temporary or permanent, whether it is a physical thing or a relationship issue, you are not affected by it. Because again, this is actually a misnomer to say you or I are not affected. The affected part is the you or me. But if we do not give it the over importance which we give to this self, then all these problems become much smaller and manageable, and they do not cause any trouble to us. They will not be affected by it. That's why, that is the reason why when we talk about any scriptural this thing, for instance, the Bhagavad Gita very clearly says, one who is not affected by heat or cold, good or bad, pleasant and unpleasant, comfortable and discomfort, something which causes discomfort. None of these things affect a sthita prajna, one who is of a stable consciousness or a stable sense of being, where he understands the true relationship between things, whether it is the objective world or whether it is the relationship world with other human beings, with other people. So the whole issue is one of approach. How do I approach? The approach should be, if in the case of solving, the approach should be very simply, going to some action which is going to clear up the issue. That means you solve it. You have an issue, you are simply solving it. And when it's a question of relationship, you need to resolve it. You need to resolve it. Then how do we do that? The next slide, when we go to the next slide, I'll give you another dimension to it. We'll go to the next slide. Now, here comes the problem, because we have, if you have noticed, we see that several issues, we leave it like that. Sometimes there may be some physical things also. We just leave it like that. We don't address them, and then they become major problems. So we need to set a time frame for addressing these issues. And the approach, as I have mentioned, for example, when there is an issue which can be solved, we have to attend to it immediately. This immediate attention to something which is broken, something which is not working, something which is causing a problem, is that time frame given to it is that it should be immediate. If something is, as I said, so that you have a small leakage problem in your bathroom, mostly what happens is we leave it that way. If it isn't really a major issue, we leave it like that. But then it is our own experience that a day will come then when it becomes a major problem. So whenever you come across a solvable issue, you solve it immediately and see that it doesn't blow up to become a major issue. This is one important thing, that we need to fix things at the earliest, and as I said, immediately we need to settle. So that's the time frame for solving objective issues. Now, when it comes to resolving issues, what we need to do is, suppose some emotional issue has come about, some problem has come. I have a dispute with somebody, I have a, we don't go together, or we don't have some commonality of meeting and resolving things. What happens is they become very strong emotional issues, whether it could be generated through our thought process or our feelings. It becomes a major issue. So what we do is, when it comes to resolvable issues, the time frame should be that first give some time, allow some time to settle down. Don't react immediately, because most of the cases we find that we regret later for our thoughtless reactions. If there is some emotional issue, we respond, or I won't use the word respond. Respond is where you give some time, but we react immediately and regret later for our own actions. So here, when there is an issue to be resolved, you allow some time to settle down, so that the force and energy that is generated through that clash, through that disturbance, the energy or the force is, you cool down. That's the reason why every time, the very sane advice is given that when you see anger mounting up in you, a very common thing that is told to all of us, which we know but we don't practice, is that count 1 to 10 or 1 to 100. You know, the reason for asking you to count from 1 to 100 when you find that there is a mounting anger in you is that the time of that counting time of 100, within that it will cool down. The intensity will substantially come down. That's a very sane advice in almost all the things. And we find that there are certain cultures where people take their own time to respond. We may want an immediate response from the other person, but the other person may be giving it a lot of thought, giving it a lot of his emotional or mental energy to it to understand the thing and then respond. So whenever you give some time, it will settle down, and then we need to attend to it. At that point of time, when things have become stable, things have calmed down, and where we have a better understanding of the issue now, instead of that immediate reaction, then what happens is we can try to resolve it. A very simple way of resolution is talking to people. When you have an emotional issue, when you have a mental issue, the simplest way is to talk to people. But otherwise, what happens with most of us is our social upbringing, our cultural background, and our own selfish motives do not allow us to resolve the issues, and they become festering wounds. They become festering wounds. There was a school teacher experiment. Most of you might have read, because we get a lot of this WhatsApp jnana, lots of WhatsApp messages we get. But see, that's a very interesting experiment of a school teacher who asked. They were all children of about 7, 8 years old. They were all asked to bring a fruit in their bags. The first day, all of them very enthusiastically brought different kinds of fruits in their bags. The teacher said, "Okay, carry it home and bring it tomorrow again." They're very faithfully, because they are all small children and they are obedient to the teacher. And they brought it the next day. But by the time they saw the fruit, it was slowly, the freshness has gone of the fruits, and then it was slowly becoming soft or, losing its freshness. Then the teacher says, do it the third day also. The third day, it slowly starts smelling. The fourth day, it becomes unbearable. The fifth day, the half of the students don't bring it home, because my parents have also scolded them. What the hell what is happening? Why is your bag smelling so much? Why are you carrying this kind? So the teacher wanted to teach them that what was very fresh on the first day, if you keep on carrying it with you for a few days, it becomes unbearable to carry it. It's a physical thing, a physical fruit. Now imagine the same thing. She says, imagine the same thing now if you are carrying hatred towards somebody, if you are carrying envy or jealousy. So at a mental and an emotional level, it starts stinking. It becomes a huge burden on the mind, and it starts festering, because we are carrying these things for not days, for months and years and decades. For decades. There is some disturbance. Prem, can you please mute? Okay. So you see, for decades we carry it without resolving, and they become major issues. And in some cases we have seen that this enmity, jealousy, envy, hatred is transmitted from one generation to the other generation also. We don't have a relationship with that family. We don't have relationship with these people in the clan. We, isolate a particular group of people based on our own considerations. These things can go on and on and on unless you resolve it. Now, when it comes to dissolving, all issues get automatically dissolved when one operates from the plane of wisdom, intelligence, and the spiritual dimension. The question of any of these baser emotions like hatred, anger, envy, jealousy, these things do not attach to a person who operates from that plane, from that level of understanding where wisdom prevails, where intelligence prevails. Intelligence is not what we normally use in the regular term as intelligence quotient and all that. That's not intelligence. Intelligence is basically the deep understanding which comes to a person through the negation of the self, as I mentioned, and that's where the spiritual dimension comes into operation. That's where we are from. That's the point from which we are now acting. So for him, there is no issue at all. It's not that he's not facing the issue. It's not that he's a spiritually evolved person doesn't have problems with mundane things. He will have, but they don't disturb him. The car is broke. It doesn't make a major difference to him. He'll find an alternative way to go, or he'll find an alternative means to address that issue without being disturbed by it. Or he may have somebody may be angry at him, somebody may be jealous of him, or somebody may have hatred towards him, but he doesn't carry that at all, and he doesn't react to it, he doesn't respond to it. In fact, his response will be diametrically opposite to that of the other person. So the third dimension, as I said, is the time frame for all these things have to be seen. Solvable issues should be addressed immediately. Resolvable issues just give some time, not too much of time also, not weeks and months and years, but give some time for that emotion to become calm, much more stable, so that your reasoning, your understanding start operating instead of immediately reacting to it and regretting it later. So this is the time frame in which we need to operate. And then we come to the next slide, which is about expression. Now, how do we express? When we come to issues that need to be solved, they should be expressed and articulated with clarity, sound reasoning, and workable solutions. This is where it's very important, because this is where all technological success comes from. Day in and day out, when you are taking up a huge project, like for example, some project of ISRO or NASA, they have a huge thing to do. They have about 30, 40, 50,000 people are working on a problem of solving issues of putting a satellite in the orbit, or sending a satellite or a vehicle to the moon or Mars or whatever it is. Now that's a huge thing, isn't it? Now what is required there? Clarity. Tremendous amount of clarity is required. They need to be very thorough with the fundamentals of all the scientific developments that are there, the technological issues that are there, and they need to address them with sound reasoning. They have to test it, they have to experiment it, they have to go through a series of activities to address them, and ultimately you need to find a workable solution. In our regular daily life also, even at a much smaller scale, we need to do this. When we have an issue, we need to have clarity about the issue, whether this issue is within my purview or not, whether I can solve it or not. If I am able to solve it, I need to do it. If I am not able to solve it, I need to bring in somebody. And most of the time, our training, unfortunately, is to create problems and not find solutions. Most of the time, there's a problem, we get stressed, and then we want somebody to solve it. And we create the problem and assume that it is somebody else's headache to solve it. So this aspect has to be very clearly understood. And when it comes to issues of the objective world, it is always a movement towards workable solutions. Don't leave it that way. As I said, they need to be addressed immediately. And you should come out with a workable solution. Workable solution means least effort to solve it, least amount of resources, whether it is money or time or anything else, least amount of resources and least amount of effort should go into it to solve it. That is what we call as efficiency or effectiveness. Efficiency. Efficiency is your ability to do it thoroughly. And effectiveness is that ultimately it works. You may be very efficient in certain things, but there could be a problem with effectiveness. I used to have an issue. When I was working for a bank, we were sitting at the head office, and always there is a clash between the branches, different branches and the head office. The branches are always stressed out because they deal with day in and day out, they deal with customers. And those fellows in the branch always think that these fellows sitting in the head office are always bossing around. They are not stressed. They don't have much work. They can come at the at the dot of 10 o'clock and then leave at 5 o'clock. But for a branch manager, this is not problem. This is a problem, and then there is always used to be a clash. But the responsibility of the head office is to see that the branch functions properly, and the head office is responsible ultimately for the generation of profit, for the prevention of losses, for recoveries and everything. Though the center is the branch, the collective responsibility is with the branch, with the head office. So we used to have a system of sending reminders to branches on a regular basis. On a weekly basis, we instruct our clerical staff or assistants to do this on a regular basis. Now, this is a very efficient way of doing it. That means I have a time frame saying that every week I send a reminder to him till he addresses that issue. But he won't address at all. It is not effective. You are efficient to that extent of doing a particular action which you are supposed to do and get a response from the other person, but there is no response from him. So that you are losing the effectiveness of it. Then when I went and told this in one of the meetings, our general manager said, see, this is the problem. You are not yet experienced. You come to me. Now you have written half a dozen letters from your side. There is no response. Now you see how I respond to it. Now, being the general manager, he is in a much senior position and authority, and he would directly write a personal letter to the manager saying that I want this issue to be resolved. You please tell me what action you have taken. If you are supposed to go for recovery of a loan, you are supposed to go at a time when the customer is available. So how many times did you go to his house at 5 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the night, when you can definitely find him there instead of going during office hours? So he used to ask half a dozen questions. Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? He himself used to say that I will not get any response to any of these questions. I am sure that fellow will not give any response to these questions. But one fine morning, he will send a reply to me, sir, I have recovered 50,000 from this customer. This is the effectiveness. In the sense, we are also interested not to corner the branch manager with several questions. We are interested that he takes action and recovers the money. So one fine morning, he will write to the general manager because he has received a personal letter from him. So he will write back to him saying that, sir, I am happy to inform you that I have recovered 50,000 with this particular. So that becomes the effectiveness. So we need to understand the difference between efficiency and effectiveness. Efficiency in doing is not sufficient. It should get you the right kind of response, and there should be a lasting solution to that problem. So that's what we call it as Then we look at it from the point of view of expression, which has to be very clear, which has to be based on sound reasoning and finding out a workable solution. Now, when it comes to resolving, issues that need to be resolved should be expressed with genuineness, understanding, and compassion. First of all, let us examine ourselves. All of us want the other person to be very honest, very truthful, very genuine in his association, in his relationship with me. Now, this can't be a one-way street. Just as I expect the other person to be honest, to be truthful, to be genuine, I should also be equally genuine, equally honest, and equally truthful in my relationship. So my expression, the first thing the other person should realize when I am expressing myself, that I am genuine. I am supposed to be very genuine. No faking, no cosmetic approach to things. No, sometimes we can make it out very easily that he doesn't really mean what he says. It's only a verbal expression of it. That even now, after a few days, you find that even children will understand whether you are genuine or not. The second aspect is, when you want to resolve an issue, you need to understand the person. The issue at hand could be that we have had a dispute, we had a fight, we had a disagreement, but that is not the nature of the person. The nature of the person could be something totally different. That a particular situation, a particular event, a particular instance, in that situation, he has reacted in a particular manner. So if we come to that understanding and try to understand the person as a whole, instead of looking at isolated events which have occurred, that becomes important. So understanding the person is much more important. So I'll give you another example. If we examine our own life, a lot of studies have also been conducted. They have found that only about 15, 20 or 25 people are in one's own life are very close to us. Not beyond that. 15, 20, 25 maybe. These are the core group who are very close to us, with whom we interact on a regular basis, on a long-term basis, and we have a very close association and relationship with them. Then we have another circle of maybe about 70, 80 or 100 or 150 people who are our friends, whom we know, with whom we have infrequent, not frequent, but very infrequent interaction. But we are associated with them. We consider them as friends. We consider them as our relations. We consider them as our extended family. But occasionally we meet. Occasionally we interact. When there is some important event, good or bad, then we meet or we interact with people. Then another larger circle is there, which may extend in certain cases to 400, 500 people, 600, 700 people. Now you have these circles of association. Now, if you see, sometimes I may have the problem with the second circle of say 100 or 150 people. In that, I may have a problem with a few of them, or they may have a problem with me. In either case, it's mutual or there is a relationship issue. Then, unfortunately, we don't examine the issue correctly or try to put it in the right perspective and try to resolve it. For instance, I've been telling so many people also who personally, when they come, when we discuss an issue, see, what is the total amount of time we spend with a particular person in our life? In this circle of say 100 or 150 people, if you see, you may be spending only hours or maybe days, maybe 30, 40, 50 hours or 100 hours in one's own lifetime, not beyond that. You meet in a wedding, How much time do you spend? An hour, 2 hours? You meet in on some other occasion. How much time do you spend with that person? But unfortunately, when you have a dispute or a disagreement or some emotional clash with that person, you give unduly high space in your memory and in your thought, and that runs for years and years and decades. So it occupies huge amount of space and time in our mind for an interaction with a person which is only limited to hours. Now, is this sensible at all? This understanding also has to come to us. Is it sensible to carry this disagreement or unpleasantness or some kind of, not exactly hatred, but something akin to it, something closer to that, where we carry this burden in our hearts for decades, or one sometimes we may not resolve it in one's lifetime at all. This understanding has to come at it. So the circles which we draw, we have to examine those circles very carefully. Now, if we are in the closed loop of say 15, 20, 25 people of our own family, closely related and close friends and associates, now what happens is if there is any issue here, you have to address it with compassion. Don't find fault with them. Don't make it a big issue. We should be in a position to pardon, forgive, and forget, not for their sake, but for one's own sake. And it also needs to be articulated. You see, most of the problems come because we have seen with even small children, if you go and ask him to say sorry, he won't like to do it. That means that the formation of that ego, that image of the self, has slowly started developing and taking hold. And mostly what we think is that if I say sorry, I will become, my stature in the eyes of the other person will be lowered. And he will think that he has got a victory. No, he has won the battle, or he has, in this particular emotional clash, he is having an upper hand and I am, my status has come down. So that's one of the major reasons why we don't apologize to people, why we don't say want to say sorry. That is the issue which one has to address, because if you look at it with compassion and for your own sake, it is important to express and resolve issues. Find out what is the issue. Find out why is it that this issue has come about between us. How do we resolve it? See, talking to people. See, this is actually the diplomatic way of doing it also. In international relations, though you may have a constant clash with the countries, with nations, you don't break away completely. We have a problem with the neighboring country, but we don't cut off the diplomatic relations completely. We keep protesting, we keep shouting at each other, we keep accusing each other, we do so many things, but we don't cut off that relationship completely. So that is important. So we don't break away, break it completely, especially with your close group. Don't have issues, festering issues with your close group. You need to resolve them, you need to address them properly, and then solve it once for all. So that you don't become smaller by saying sorry to somebody. You don't become smaller by admitting your mistake, admitting your fault, and apologizing to people. That's a way of compassionate way of looking at things and solving them. And it can be extended to the other circles also. You have a circle of bigger circle. There also you need to address them. There also you can talk to them and say that I'm sorry, or this is what I did not mean this. I did not mean what you have said, what happened on that day. That was, I might have been in a very bad mood, or something else has happened and I have reacted in a bad way, in a way which was not, my original nature or my regular way of behavior. Unfortunately, it happened on that day because I was stressed out or because there's some issue. So this mutual understanding and responding with compassion is what is essential for resolving issues, and expression is the most important. And then finally, when it comes to dissolving, I am talking about, as I said, you are working from a plane of that wisdom and that spiritual dimension, in which case what happens is there will be no issues at all when it comes to the stage of dissolve. What you have dissolved is not the issue. What you have dissolved is not the problem. You have dissolved yourself. I have dissolved myself. The self is no longer operating in the same manner, and there is no issue at all now. The dissolution is not about the problem. The problem may still be there. The issue may still be there, but you are unaffected by it. And you respond in a very positive manner to any negative inputs also. There's a very famous story of the Buddha. It seems suddenly when the Buddha along with his disciples was going in a town, some fellow came and started abusing Buddha, and it went on and on for 10-15 minutes. Then ultimately that fellow stopped. The Buddha was totally serene and quiet and calm and not responding at all. But when that fellow stopped, the Buddha said, "Can I ask you a small question?" He said, "Okay, please ask." This fellow felt that I am so happy now because I have taken out all my angst, all my frustration on him, and I have abused him. I wanted to abuse him, and I have abused him, and he was feeling, smug and satisfied about it. Then the Buddha said, "I want to ask you a question." Then he said, the question is, "Sir, suppose somebody gives you a present and you don't take that present, to whom does the present belong?" Then that fellow said, "Obviously to the person who wanted to give it." Then the Buddha folded his hands and said, "Sir, the presentation you gave me for the past 15 minutes, I refuse to accept that presentation. You keep it to yourself." So the presentation, I don't accept it. I don't receive it at all. I'm totally unaffected by it. So it remains with the person who has given it. That's the meaning of dissolving. See, what is dissolved is not the external issue as in the other two cases, but the internal or root causes that throw up the issues to be solved or resolved. It's the internal thing. It is something which is within me, and I am undisturbed by either worldly issues or relationship issues. And my response, whatever be the nature of the response or reaction of the other person, my response will always be one which is spontaneous and which is one which comes out of that great love. So in any case, whatever be the issue, the expression is spontaneous and comes out of with that great sense of love, the radiance of that love that person carries. So for him, there is no issue at all. Even if he faces any worldly difficulty, he's not bothered much about it. One of the verses on which Adi Shankara writes a commentary and says, for a truly wise and realized person whom he calls as a jnani, he lives in this world expecting the least and minimum from the world. His only purpose is to keep his body alive. Whatever minimum that is required to keep the body alive, only that he draws from the world. Beyond that, he doesn't draw anything. And he does not have any relationship or emotional bondage as we understand in our familial or fraternal bonding which we have. He doesn't have that. He has that great compassion and love for the entire humanity. So he is not bound by any of these things, and he is not stressed out mentally or emotionally or physically in any manner, because he accepts the least amount from the world physically also, and he has no sense of being attached to any of these things. In fact, coming back to the Buddha, a question was asked about Buddha. Somebody said, "Sir, now you have become the Buddha, the awakened one. Do you still love your son?" Then the Buddha replied, "I love the entire world, I love the entire humanity, and my son is a part of the humanity. I have no special love for anybody, as you may understand. When I love the entire humanity, is he not a part of humanity?" So, so that is what is important. So acting from that great sense of being in a state of universal love, that should be the expression from which from which a person who is spiritually awakened responds, and his response is absolutely spontaneous. Now, if you see, now it's a question of the four aspects. If you connect the four aspects, I have given you the four aspects as definitions, approaches, time frame, and expression, which forms the acronym DATE. So let us have a date with solve, resolve, and dissolve in the manner I wanted to present to you. So thank you so much. I'll take up any questions. If there are any questions, I can take them up.
Okay.
What is important in the issue which I have addressed is, this is something which is closely connected with our daily living. Unfortunately, sometimes what happens is we think that spirituality or living wisely is something out of the world, and then we completely go out of it and live it. It's not possible. We live in this world. We'll continue to live in this world. We'll continue to interact with people. We continue to have relationships. We continue to have everything associated with this. It's the sadhana, the practice should be on a daily basis with every interaction which we have, either with the objective world or the world of human beings or relationships. It is an opportunity for us to practice, for us to put things in practice and then progressively become evolved so that we have a greater and greater understanding. See, unfortunately, what happens in most of the cases is, again, I am reminded of Jiddu Krishnamurti when he used to say that we are stuck in a small corner of our own life, in a boring and stressful life, and we miss out the vastness of life. We miss out how vast life is by getting stuck in one corner of it, by not coming out of that groove, not coming out of that mess, and then realizing the beauty of the whole creation.
Okay, I think there are no more questions, so we'll conclude the session. So just a quick,
okay. we can conclude.
Yeah, just a quick note to thank you for this interesting discussion, KK.
Some question has come in the chat. I am finding very difficult to be detached from the family. No, see, I'll tell you one thing. Don't get detached. The getting detached or attached is a mental aspect. Is a mental factor, sir. Grewalji, you have to understand that you can love your family, but not get too much involved in it. Don't interfere in their life. Don't allow them to interfere too much with your own life also. That's a sense of attachment. There's a famous example again that is given, is that a wise man is of the world but not in the world. A wise man is of the world, but he's not in the world. He's not involved in the world to that extent. And again, the very well-known this thing of a drop of water on a lotus leaf. It is on the lotus leaf, but it is not it does not wet the lotus leaf. In fact, it shines like a pearl. So every relationship can shine like a pearl if you make yourself as a lotus leaf. That comes through compassion, through love. And you need not worry too much about them. Life will take care. Life will take care. Life will bring ups and downs in everybody's life. Let us not be overprotective about our families, about our children, about our grandchildren, about everybody who is close to me, and worry about them and then go on interfering in their life, guiding them, teaching them, and all these things may not be necessary at all. And similarly, let the family also not have too much of interference in your own life or importance in your life to the extent that you are constantly disturbed by it. That is what is need to be seen. I can be very pleasant, I can be very lovable, I can be very considerate with my family, but at the same time, not too much attached to them, because this attachment will break someday or the other. Suppose what happens to all my attachments if I die? Where will they go? They'll be simply vanished, because that is something impermanent, something that is situational, that is contextual. So we are giving too much of importance to our own family. At a particular stage in life, it's very important. When your children are very, very small, when you have brought them into this world, it is your responsibility. One doesn't mean, detached does not mean irresponsibility. With all responsibility, with all consideration, with all love, with all your affection, you can be associated with your family, but also at the same time realize that it is not the be all and end all of life. That's where we get cornered in a small corner of this world. We are stuck. We don't see the vastness of life. Don't we see that every day people are having problems? People are having problems which are unimaginable for us. Children being maimed in war zones, parents dying of young children, totally orphaned and seriously affected, whether due to war or due to disease or due to malnutrition or anything. See, are they not human beings? Why am I so much concerned about my children, my grandchildren, my family, and then getting attached to them? The bondage is ours. Actually, it is not them. There's a very famous story of Janaka and Ashtavakra. You know, Janaka was considered as a Rajarshi and Ashtavakra was his teacher. On one occasion, Janaka is very stressed because of the affairs of the government, because he was a king, because of the problems of the kingdom and governance and all. Janaka once expresses to Ashtavakra and saying, "Sir, I really appreciate what you are teaching me and all that. I want to really practice, but unfortunately, I am bound to the kingdom. You know, the kingdom is holding me. The kingdom is holding me so strongly that I am unable to do anything." Then to teach him a lesson, Ashtavakra goes and hugs a pillar and starts shouting, saying that, "Oh king, the pillar is holding me. The pillar is holding me. The pillar, I am in the clutches of the pillar." Then Janaka laughs at him and says, "Sir, you are holding the pillar and saying the pillar is holding you." And he says, "Oh, now do you realize that you are holding the kingdom and thinking that the kingdom is holding you?" So what happens in all these things is we reverse the situations. We think that something else is holding me instead of realizing that I am holding on to them. That's where our understanding, our wisdom comes. And that is where the deeper study of the scriptures becomes essential. It's not a question of, don't look at detachment as though you are cutting off some relationship. In fact, the bond becomes much more pleasant, the bond becomes much more enjoyable when you have this sense of not being caught by it and not holding on to it. That's the beauty of life. I hope I have answered you. Thank you, sir. Yeah. Any further questions? No further questions. I think we
have
are
reached the time.
already short, 20 minutes beyond the time, and because of the initial delay also. So,
All right.
shall we, Premji, shall we conclude the session?
Yes. First of all, a big thank you for your interesting.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I thank all the participants.
Yeah, you're based in US at the moment, and there's a lot of time difference.
Yeah, I'm based in US at the moment. So it's 7:50 early in the morning.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
We look forward to your presence every week on Tuesdays and Fridays, where we bring to you interesting topics on holistic wellness and the arts, delivered by a host of distinguished, knowledgeable speakers. Our next talk will be on 1st of September at 7 p.m. We have Ms. Vamsi Madhavi, a dancer by profession, who will take us into a journey, Samarpan, an offering, where she will talk to us on some of the dance forms she specializes in, as well as her journey into dance. Thank you once again for your presence and participation today from all of us at Rtambhara. And with that, we conclude today's session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.